Now, everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Colin Green. Now, this is the wonderful Colin who set up and ran IMET 2000. And in fact, Colin, you and let me just be clear, IMET that this we're asking for donations tonight on the website. You can go. There's a little donate button on the Go Faster Stripe button. We're asking for donations for 3 organisations, one of which is IMET 2000, one of which is Firefly International, and the other of which is ICAD. Colin.
Hello. Thank you for your show. Terrific. Absolutely terrific.
Well,
I'm so sorry we tried to get in on that link and it was impossible.
Oh, blimey. I'm sorry, Colin.
Okay. No, it may be me. Anyway, go on.
What I love about you is your resolute honesty, because you go, you had a shit link and I didn't watch it. Oh, well.
I wasn't saying.
Colin, do you, I just want to cast your mind back because you actually appear in another one of my shows.
I did indeed, yes. And people rang me up from all over the UK to say that Mark Thomas had indicated that he'd spoken to a posh public school voice git who was a doctor and wanted him to help me with setting up a burns unit in Gaza. And what could he say? And he did, and you've helped me ever since. And that must be 12 years ago.
I remember because you came up to me and it was at we first met at a meeting where there's a big platform.
It was an ICAD meeting. It was an ICAD meeting, the AGM, and I came up to you and introduced myself then, and you almost ignored me. And I kept on writing to you, and eventually you said, you gave in and said, okay, what do we do?
Well, I'm very grateful for your persistence because I'm very I feel very I'm trying to think of the right word here, but I really treasure our relationship and the work that you do. What you do is quite remarkable in the fact that IMET was set up to train medical practitioners in originally poor parts of the world.
That's correct, yes.
And get them access to the highest level of training.
Indeed, that was the idea, was to exploit the IT revolution back in 2000, but it was before the internet and it wasn't successful in that I didn't get enough money to run the thing. So we concentrated on the Middle East, which we knew well, and bits of Africa. And now we've expanded worldwide. But for this evening, really, we're concentrating on the Middle East, the work we do in Jordan and Syria, in Turkey camps for refugees, and Gaza, and of course in Palestine.
I think it was we did a show together, and I was really pleased that I did a show with you to raise money for the first ever director of child mental health in the West Bank.
That's correct. Yes, indeed. And the director of mental health unit is called Dr. Summer Jabbar, and she was one of our very first students at the Al-Quds Medical School, which we set up in 1994. And she was one of the very first students. Only 32 of them started. Something like 30 actually came to classes. And she was an outstanding woman then, and obviously so. And eventually she was the only person for the next 10 years who would take up mental health and psychiatry as a profession. And now we have people queuing up to get our scholarships and fellowships in training in psychiatry, for child psychiatry. It's an amazing change round, which she's been responsible, and to some extent our chief executive, changing the whole idea.
I remember that gig, and one of the reasons why I remember it was that it was held on this boat called HQS Wellington.
Wellington, that's right.
And it's some kind of Jolly Jack Tar dining club. If I'm not being too dismissive when I call it that, but it's like a dining for ex-service people, isn't it?
It is mostly Merchant Navy, but some Royal Navy people. And we took up running our events, many of our events there, because my father-in-law was captain of it in the Atlantic convoys in 1940. and he subsequently got 3 DSCs for it, for his escort of convoys across the Atlantic. But that was one of his first commands. So we go back to it as a sort of historical family thing and enjoy it on that basis.
What I remember, I was setting up some paintings and stuff that we were going to auction, and a bloke came up to me, and he was he had obviously been to some function, and he just went, "All right, then, Mark Thomas." I said, "Yes," and he introduced himself to me, and he said, "Yeah, I was." I've done a few tours out in the Gulf, blah, 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 Navy, all of that. And I said, all right. And he said, what are you doing? I said, we're doing a fundraiser to raise money for child mental health services in Palestine. And he went, oh, that makes sense. Because basically, if you're near something that goes bang, it does not fucking stay with you. And I remembered that.
I don't remember that story.
I remember it because it was just like the most simple explanation of child mental health in the West Bank that you could have.
Indeed. Well, of course, our problems now are compounded by the COVID virus attacking Palestine. The West Bank is seriously now up to 20,000 people being infected. Something like 450 people being infected, new cases each day, and something like seven people dying each day. So we're desperate to get our COVID respirators out to Palestine and into Palestine as quickly as possible, because they can prevent people having to go onto invasive ventilators.
The respirators are the CPAP, which are face masks, and they have the
very close-fitting face mask, but you don't have to put a tube into the patient to invade their trachea.
I talked to because I've been doing this podcast talking to people in the NHS, and they're very much sort of saying that actually the CPAP is the way forward. That this is that actually intubation has got a 50-50 chance of it, and it's not great. It's you need to get it before it gets to that stage, and CPAP is the way of. They basically, this wonderful woman who's describing it, she said it's like sticking your head out of a car doing 60 miles an hour, sticking your head out the window, opening your mouth, and then traveling for 4 hours. And I kind of thought, okay.
And that's very true. If you can get people onto it quite early, when they're obviously ill enough to have to go into intensive care, if you get them right at the beginning of that process, you can very often, 50% at least, prevent them having to go onto the invasive ventilators, which in Palestine, there are only about 120 ventilators in the whole population. And some of them aren't very effective, and they need to be very carefully trained staff running them. So I mean, 50 recovery, which you get in this country from invasive ventilators, is much less successful in Palestine at the moment.
I remember, I think there's worth pointing out a couple of things, which is, one is the fact that actually Palestinian hospitals have been targeted, Palestinian medical staff have been targeted by the army. And often there is a case, I remember doing a fundraiser for the burns unit in Gaza. And I think I'm right in remembering that the chap who ran the burns unit, who was this wonderful sort of humble fella that I just felt like some human piece of vaudevillian trash next to, he ran the burns unit, and they had something like 12 beds in the burns unit. And on the first night of Operation Cast Lead, when they were dropping the phosphorus, they had sort of like over 50 people arrive on the first night.
That's correct. The guy you're talking about is Nafis Abu Shaban, and he's now semi-retired, but he's an exceptional man, trained in Glasgow and went back to Gaza and lives in Gaza with his family. And he's absolutely outstanding man. And I wanted to emphasize that the work we do in Gaza is very much a collaborative affair with Firefly International on the child mental health program, but particularly with Medical Aid for Palestine, who've been extraordinary supporting Palestinians, and specifically Palestinians. Unlike us trying to be more global, they've concentrated on Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon, and indirectly through Syria and Jordan because of refugees coming out. but they have been outstanding supporters of the Palestinian health system. And they were actually responsible for sending me out to help set up the medical school in 1992, opened in 1994, and very much involved now in the burns unit in both the West Bank, in Hebron, a new burns unit down there, and in Gaza as well, and setting up a neurosurgery unit. So very much involved in limb reconstruction, all things that are desperately needed in Gaza and the West Bank. And of course, I wanted this evening to emphasize the work that we all do in children, who are the worst sufferers of all this conflict. It's the most terrible conflict right through the Middle East. We haven't touched on Yemen, and I can't even think about going into Yemen because it's such a massive problem.
I think I mean, what impressed me, I think, was the thinking that, especially when the wall was going up, that so many Palestinians were prevented from getting the medical help that they needed to get, that actually the hospitals they needed to go was on the other side of the wall. And you would find examples of people who couldn't get access to their cancer care, who couldn't get across to be with people. Often relatives were blocked, appointments were missed. I think I'm right in saying there are 3 categories of childbirth in Palestine, which is children born at home, children born at hospital, children born at checkpoints. Is that right? Did I get that right?
Well, very few born at checkpoints. I wouldn't want to emphasize that one. But what we are seeing is that children are coming out of Gaza into Nablus and into Bethlehem as well. Little kids of 5, 6, or 7 with cancers, without their parents and with either a grandparent or neighbor, and not allowed to come with their own parents. Can you imagine a child of that age, bereft of their parents, having to go through daily chemotherapy and radiotherapy? It's absolutely appalling. And part of our treatment, in fact, in a big part of our IMET program in child mental health is art therapy and music therapy, which is on our website. We make a big thing of that, not only for treating children with cancer, but all ages, vulnerable people, and maintaining things like the Edward Said Conservatory of Music. So important to maintain the culture of the society. It's a basis. A society or a group of people under occupation just surviving without any culture is a lost cause as far as I'm concerned. And we feel passionately about supporting, and we have done many cultural events both in Gaza and in the West Bank, and we feel very strongly about that. And I think it's the basis of protecting children from mental health problems, particularly from post-traumatic stress syndrome.
We're also, one of the other groups we're working with is ICAD, which is the Israeli Committee Against House Destruction, Demolition.
House demolitions, that's correct. Right. Go on.
I wonder if you wanted to say a few words about ICAD.
Yes. Yes, ICAD has been founded by Jeff Halper, actually, who was originally an American anthropologist, came over to Israel, settled there in about, I think, 1975, and became a humanitarian activist. He combines being, without being an academic in a university, he combines academic analysis of situations and with great honesty, and seeking peace for Israel and Palestine, which surely all of us must be longing for, by non-violent activist and humanitarian routes, particularly protecting children who've been thrown out of their homes in the middle of the night after the homes have been demolished, as being illegal. Frequently been illegal because, as you said in an earlier, in your actual performance, you talked about the permits not being awarded, therefore expansion of the house to expanding family was illegal. It's illegal in that setting, in that law setting. But ICAD tries to achieve a peaceful end to this conflict through non-violent means, and that's why I support it. And they're particularly keen, as we are, on supporting children who've been thrown out of their homes.
They also, I mean, what's wonderful is they also go and rebuild homes that have been demolished, and Israeli and international activists will work with Palestinians on the ground and actually rebuild homes.
That's correct. I mean, the great thing about ICAD is that there are two things. They rebuild homes, not just with Palestinians, but they have international activists, but many Israelis come over, young people who are worried by the situation that they're facing for their future, under constant threat or constant fear, as you put it in your show, wanting a peaceful settlement and knowing that it's possible if only people got together and talked. They come over and help build these, rebuild these demolished homes. The other thing is that Linda Ramsden, who runs the UK branch, which is the biggest branch of ICAD, runs excursion tours 3 to 4 a year with, say, between 12 and 17 people, virtually non-profitable, but opening the eyes of many people to what the reality is. And I remember helping her with one for clinicians, and we had at least, I think 6 out of 17 were British psychiatrists, psychologists, or mental health workers, and many of them were friends of mine. Many of them were Jewish. I think 6 of them were Jewish, and they came over, and ever since they have been desperate to try and solve this conflict through non-violent and non-conflicting means.
I think one of the, I do remember, I have to quickly tell you, Colin, and I know this, forgive me this, but I'm always drawn to the story that when I first met Jeff Halpern, the American who now lives in Israel,
Yeah.
I said, well, where were you from in America? And he said, Minnesota. They used to call us the Frozen Chosen.
You never told me that one. We spent years together, laughing together, and I've never heard that one.
Well, he's obviously got a lot of material.
Yeah, certainly has that.
Listen, Colin,
like you though, he's a very funny man with a serious
great.
mind, and that's a great combination because you can get your point over without being prejudiced or discriminatory against any one group of people.
I wanted to say we're going to wind up now, Colin, but I just wanted to say to people watching, if you've got a couple of quid, I know times are tight and they're really hard. But if you've got a couple of quid, if you go over to Go Fast Strike, there's a donation there. Go there and there's a link that will lead you into a donation page. If you can give it, I think you've got matched funding, haven't you, Colin?
I'll find match funding. That's my way. But what I do want to say before you close is that I do want to emphasize the fantastic work that my colleagues in Firefly International are doing. They're working specifically with children victims of war, and they're working in Idlib, inside Syria, in Antalya, in Turkey, in refugee camps, and in Gaza. They're working with me, with our charity, and an ACT, another charity, in child mental health. And they have in past worked in Palestine, again with me and with my charity in Nablus, for children with special needs. So they're an educational and human rights NGO, which are doing wonderful work with children of victims of war and pandemics. And of course, this is a massive pandemic we're facing now.
So listen, Colin, I just wanted to say thank you ever so much for coming on. And as usual, it's an absolute pleasure. You should be retired, but I think it's impossible for you to do so.
Never. Never. Until I'm thrown out, I go to the wire.
Well, listen, Colin, it's a delight to see you, and I hope we can get some money for IMET, Firefly International, and for ICAD.
Thank you very much.
That's an absolute pleasure, Colin. It's always me who feels that I should be thanking you, because you always make me feel such an inferior being because you're too good. You're too good, Colin. I'm going to have to say something.
You'll make me cry. We must have a laugh. No,
you're absolutely
serious things, and we must get on and fight to the wire for peace for all of us. Doesn't matter what our ethnicity is. It's absolutely, I feel so passionate about all of us getting on, especially after this pandemic. We've got to work together, otherwise we're stuffed as human apes. Thank you.
That's the best way to finish tonight's show. I think we've got to work together or we're stuffed. I genuinely think that is probably the best way of finishing it. I'd like to thank everyone who came and well, all of you for coming and watching. Thank you for bearing with the problems. Get in touch with Chris and I, and we will sort out any that you have, and we'll make sure you get to see the show. Thank you. I'll put up the links for you so you can go and see the interview with Phil in the next couple of days. Please give to iCAD, IMAT, and to Firefly. Thanks to Chris. Thanks to Sammy. Thanks to Tin Cat. And thank you all for watching. And really do look after yourself. All right?
Thank you.
Look after yourself. Look after each other, because no one else is going to do it for us.
Thanks everybody for watching. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye. I saw your hand, Liz. I saw your hand.
She's still here. Still after 66 years, can you believe?
That, mate, is dedication.
I know. Tell me.
Night, everyone. Thanks for coming. Chris, thanks a lot. Sammy, thank you.